Chapter 959. Chin Mo still remembered when he received this lighter. He couldn't wait to hold it in his hand and play with it several times. He couldn't get enough of it and liked it no matter how much he looked at it. He didn't want anyone else to touch it except him. So he always carried it with him. Chin Mo knew very well that the girl didn't know what day it was. From her wandering eyes, it could be seen that she had forgotten everything, and her guilty conscience could be seen. The next day, she gave him such a thing. It was because the girl was the one who gave him the lighter that he couldn't bear to part with it. But at the end of the day, he had used some tricks to get this gift from her. Chin Mo's fingers tightened, and his eyes deepened. Captain. Coco had just finished a live broadcast and was still wearing his uniform. He wanted to take advantage of the break to come in to rest and seek comfort from his captain. As the person who carried the external publicity of the entire team, Coco would sometimes appear in the company. But he hadn't seen Manager Feng today, so he didn't know how Chin Mo was feeling today. After hearing the sound, Chin Mo glanced sideways. Coco sat on the sofa, his tiger teeth exposed. He reached out and tugged at his shirt. Captain, next time when you answer questions in the live broadcast, you and Little Spade should go. 80% of the people are asking me if you are really together. I said you are brothers, but they didn't believe me. I'm not good at lying, so I almost exposed you. Coco spoke for a while. Seeing that his captain didn't even look at him, he hopped over, holding a bag of yogurt in his mouth and looking at Chin Mo. The captain didn't even look at him. He was holding something in his hand. Coco looked for a while. He really didn't understand what was so good about this little thing. Why would the captain look at it for so long? After drinking the yogurt, Coco threw the bag away and asked curiously, Captain, what is this? Coco's question seemed to finally pull Chin Mo's eyes back. Lighter. Chin Mo's voice was very calm, as if the thing in his hand was nothing special. Coco widened his eyes. This is a lighter. This shape. It looks good. Where did you buy it? Chin Mo remained silent. But even so, Coco didn't notice that his captain was in a bad mood. He continued to look at the pure silver lighter. The more he looked, the more he liked it. Let me try lighting a cigarette. Why are you lighting a cigarette? Chin Mo arched a brow and threw the cigarette lighter to the side. Such an ugly thing. Ugly? Coco looked at his captain's side profile. There was no emotion on it. The naive Coco thought that his captain simply didn't like the igniter. Captain, if you think it's ugly, give it to me. I think it looks good. When Chin Mo heard that, he lifted his eyes and glanced at Coco. Her gaze was so cold that Coco's scalp went numb. He thought he had said something wrong, and his left hand felt like it was frozen. What did the captain mean? He had already said that it was ugly. Doesn't that mean I don't like it? Why was she looking at him as if she wanted to chop off his hand in the next second? Just when Coco thought that the captain would say something to him, Coco's eyes widened. A cold and indifferent voice rang out again, up to you. Up to you. Did the captain mean that he could take the lighter away? But that wasn't what the captain's gaze said. Coco confirmed again. Can I really take it away? Didn't I say up to you? Chin Mo sat on the sheepskin office chair. His slender and fair fingers flipped open the contract beside him. He had a handsome face, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in his voice. Instead, it was cold for no reason. Coco saw that his captain's expression was really unfriendly. He could only shut his mouth and tentatively reached out to touch the electronic lighter. Seeing that there wasn't any reaction, he gathered his courage and put it in his pocket. He turned to leave. Chin Mo, who was sitting on the office chair, paused for a moment. When he came back to his senses, the words came out of his mouth. Put it back. Coco turned back to look at his captain. His gaze was a little shocked. After all, his captain had never gone back on his words. After Chin Mo met Coco's gaze, his voice became faint. You can choose another one. Didn't you always like the mouse I used before? When Coco heard this, his focus immediately shifted. He put the lighter on the table and said excitedly, Captain means that I can take that mouse. N. Chin Mo said, holding the lighter in his hand again. Of course, Coco saw this scene. He was very puzzled. What did the captain think of this lighter? If he said it wasn't important, why did he treasure it so much? One had to know that the captain's mouse was a limited edition. Whether it was the feel or the appearance, it was first class. In the past, he wouldn't even let him touch it. Now, in order to keep the lighter, he directly abandoned the mouse. If he said it was important, just now, the captain seemed to want to throw it away. What was going on? Before Coco could figure it out, he was picked up by Feng Yi, who came to arrange work. Along the way, Coco told everything he saw to their manager. He wanted Feng Yi to help him analyze what was going on. After listening, Manager Feng frowned even more. It seemed that he still had to have a good talk with those two people. In the CEO's office, without Coco, everything seemed unusually quiet. Chin Mo glanced at the lighter in his palm and slid open the phone screen. There was still no message in the WeChat dialog box. When Feng Yi pushed the door and walked in, this was the scene he saw. Since you want to contact him, why don't you call Little Spade directly? Hearing this, Chin Mo looked up at him, even his voice was cold. Is the company very free today? How could it be, very busy? As a manager, Feng Yi still dared to say some things. If you continue like this, how are you going to play in the competition? Besides, Little Spade usually listens to you. Is there a misunderstanding? Chin Mo didn't say anything. Feng Yi continued, in a relationship, there are some things that have to be said clearly. It's useless for you to sit here like this. Chin Mo sat back and pulled off his tie, full of abstinence. The door is behind you. That meant that he could go. Feng Yi shut his mouth but felt that it was necessary to clarify. What exactly are you angry about? This was a question without an answer. The man in front of him was still looking at the contract in his hands, cold and without a trace of space. Feng Yi knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him even if he continued asking. He glanced at the lighter that Coco had mentioned. It was obviously too important, hence, even though he was angry, he didn't throw it away. It should be from Little Spade. It seemed like he had to put in more effort to find out the reason. As the manager of the club, he didn't just have to guard against his players dating outsiders, he also had to guard against them dating insiders. You don't have to worry about my condition. Feng Yi waited for Chin Mo to speak, but he didn't say the reason. Instead, he said faintly, there won't be any problems in the competition. At this point, Feng Yi didn't know what else to say. He could only solve the problem from the side. To solve the problem from the side was to ask the other party. After leaving the office, the first thing Feng Yi did was to call Bojo. The youngster's phone went through but no one picked up. Feng Yi pressed his head, unaware that Bojo had drunk alcohol in the afternoon. Bojo drank around 10 bottles of Budweiser alone. After finishing, she returned to the dormitory and climbed onto the bed. She slept on the upper bunk, which was much quieter than the lower bunk. Classes started on Sunday afternoon. Bojo wasn't in the mood to go to class. She got on the bed, opened the quilt, and covered her head with it. She listened to the sound of rain outside. The scene on the street was still replaying in her mind. From afar, that person had been sitting in a car. He had seen her but his gaze had been indifferent, as though she was just an ordinary person. Bojo froze, her heart clenched tightly. She couldn't fall asleep at first. But after the alcohol kicked in, drowsiness slowly crept over her. Her chest was still unable to accept the emptiness, as though she had lost something. Fortunately, alcohol was useful, it could help her sleep. Hence, the sleeping Bojo didn't hear her phone vibrating. Her roommates didn't dare to disturb her, but when the phone kept ringing, they guessed that something had happened. Thorny's roommates first looked at the caller ID. The name Fox Phone was especially eye-catching. But since it was the school hunk's phone, they didn't dare to touch it. They could only wait for the ringing to subside. The sleeping Bojo was dreaming. Her dreams were filled with scenes from her childhood. When she woke up, there was no one in the dormitory. Everyone had probably gone to class. Bojo lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. During this period of time, Bojo had been with Chinamo ever since that day. The sight of no one in the room when she opened her eyes had become rare. Because every time she woke up, there would be someone by her side. But now, it was obvious that she wouldn't be able to enjoy such treatment anymore. Bojo tilted her head. She was listless, her movements weren't as agile as before. Coincidentally, the headmaster had brought someone from the student council to check on the dormitory. Classes had started, but there were still students sleeping in the dormitory. Coincidentally, the school director came to inspect the dormitory with people from the student union. Classes had already started, but there were still students sleeping in the dormitory. One could imagine that no matter who that person was, the headmaster's expression would not be too good. But because it was Bojo, he didn't punish her too harshly. Go to the field and do frog jumps. Go to class after you do 100. The headmaster wasn't bad. He was strict with the students, but he treated them well. Bojo respected him even though she hadn't been to school. Moreover, she didn't want to be idle. When she reached the field, she squatted down, placed her hands behind her back and started to jump. Bojo's jump attracted the attention of many students. Look, isn't that the top student? Frog jumps on the first day of school. My Highness Joe is so unlucky to be caught by the devil. But what should we do with Highness Joe's cute and handsome jumping? Some of the students from the normal classes started to discuss openly. The teacher standing on the podium knocked heavily on the blackboard. Pull your attention back. It seemed like she would have to discuss with the headmaster. Even if she wanted to punish someone, she couldn't do it on the field. It was too eye-catching. It was indeed eye-catching. With Bojo's silver hair and face, it was rare to see her jumping with her hands behind her back. It was no wonder people wanted to see it. But as the saying went, enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. Number 1 middle school and number 2 middle school were close to each other. Even though the useless number 2 middle school's field wasn't as big as number 1 middle school's field. However, the two fields were also next to each other, separated by a net. It was common for middle year 2 youngsters to be punished. However, the moment he stepped out, he saw Bojo bouncing on the number 1 middle school field. Instantly, he became excited. He didn't even care about the teacher who was hitting him with a book. He ran over and asked Bojo, "Hey, what were you punished for?" Bojo didn't reply. The teenager continued, "Let me tell you, I'm being punished unjustly this time. Do you still remember when I asked you to play for me to confirm my relationship with my girlfriend? I just went to your number 1 middle school and gave my girlfriend lunch. I even used the roses planted in the school to prove my innocence. Not only did your director get angry when he saw me, he even punished me." Bojo slowed down. She glanced at him and said slowly, "That's a good punishment. I can't stand people like you who show affection everywhere." The number 2 middle school youngster, it took time for the frog to jump. The school hunk of number 1 middle school and the boss of number 2 middle school were punished at the same time. But one of them was clean and handsome from start to finish. The other one was hit on the head by the headmaster. Shui Yao Yao saw the scene too. She placed the pencil in her hand aside, her gaze on the youngster didn't retract. The school had to pass the test in order to successfully participate in the National League. Hence, Bojio had always been cooperative. The headmaster was satisfied with the youngster's attitude and didn't call his parents. Bojio was also glad that his parents weren't notified. After all, Chin Mo's name was written in her contact list. But after this time, even if he was notified, he probably wouldn't come. Bojio sat on the edge of the field. Bojio sat at the edge of the field, using the back of her hand to wipe the sweat that was dripping down her sharp chin. The fangirls couldn't control themselves. The teachers probably knew that no one was listening to this class. Everyone's attention was on the field. But Bojio's attention was on her phone. She couldn't be too presumptuous in front of the headmaster. She found a secluded place and wanted to call Manager Phone. Chapter 960. The Japanese. The team that Hoshino was in. Alright, I'll be there in a while. Bojio stood up. She had just done her frog jumps and her legs weren't as nimble. She knocked on the phone but didn't reply immediately. Brother Amo, are you there? Fongyi glanced over at Chin Amo, who was putting on his uniform. He lowered his voice. MMH, I'm here. Bojio paused, listening to the faint voice from the other end of the phone. Who are you talking to? He didn't know why he felt guilty, so he directly hung up the phone. Fongyi listened to the busy tone, meeting Chin Mo's gaze. His gaze was calm, carrying an indescribable depth. With Boss Chin's intelligence, he must have guessed who was on the other end. But for some reason, he didn't seem to understand. Boss Chin lowered his head and adjusted his sleeves, asking. Fongyi coughed lightly. It's Little Spade, the Japanese are here and they have to gather the entire team. Chin Mo didn't say anything else. As a manager who understood his team members' thoughts, Fongyi added, Little Spade said she'll be here in a while. Chin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, arching a brow. Oh. She's so scared that she hung up on you. Are you sure she'll be here in a while? Fongyi coughed again. This time, it wasn't intentional but he really choked. He lowered his voice. You've been waiting for her news the entire day. I asked you to contact her but you didn't. Boss Chin, why do you have to do this? Chin Mo glanced at him. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. I just wanted to know my position in her heart. Now, it's clear. Fongyi opened his mouth. The words were at the tip of his tongue but he couldn't say them. He had never seen Chin Mo in such a state. Even though he was still standing, when he glanced out of the window, there was a sense of desolation. Fongyi understood that whoever started the trouble had to end it. He still had to wait for Little Spade. Let's go. Chin Mo picked up the cigarette lighter on his desk. The collar of his pure black uniform was flipped up, revealing his chiseled and cold handsome face. Fongyi heaved a long sigh and rubbed his head. On the other side, it wasn't convenient for Bojio to apply for leave the moment she finished her frog jumps. Fortunately, Yao Yao was there to testify for her. It was something that happened in the club. Otherwise, with the suspicious gaze of the headmaster, Bojio would really have to climb over the wall if she wanted to come out. The two of them took a taxi. They didn't have time to change into their combat uniforms, so they put on their school uniforms. It wasn't far from the school to the club. Bojio glanced down at her phone. She knew the problem wasn't with the medicine. In fact, the Almighty had restrained himself every time he wanted her because he was afraid of hurting her. She knew very well what the problem was. However, there were some things that could not be said. Moreover, she was about to leave. Bojio swiped the screen before sliding it back. Shui Yao Yao obviously noticed that the person sitting next to her wasn't in the right state of mind. She called out softly, "Your Highness Joe." Bojo glanced over. "What is it? Is something the matter?" Shui Yao Yao asked directly. Bojo paused for a moment before smiling. "Nothing much, I made a mistake and am reflecting on it. Face the wall in front of my phone and reflect." Shui Yao Yao didn't understand. Bojo glanced at the WeChat page again, thinking about how the person she was going to meet would treat her like a stranger. Her eyes dimmed and her silver hair drooped down. Shui Yao Yao paused. She didn't look like she was fine. But that was probably how Bojo was. When there was no one around, no matter how lazy and dispirited she was, it wouldn't affect her devilish nature. Hence, when she reached the club, she saw a baby-faced person pointing at her. "That's the guy I'm going to PK with." Bojo swept him a glance, her voice nonchalant. "Who are you?" The baby-faced person's eyes widened. "How can you not know who I am? Are you very handsome? Why should I know you?" Bojo walked forward, her gaze sweeping over the baby-faced person's combat uniform. She arched a brow. The baby-faced person noticed her gaze, straightening his body. "You should know now, I just defeated one of your members. How is it? Do you want to PK with me?" Bojo paused, a hint of a smile on her face. "I'm the first official member of our team to arrive. Is there anything to be proud of when the Japanese's first member defeated our reserve team?" Bojo seemed to be more lethal when she wasn't in a good mood, even her words were sharper than usual. Shui Yao Yao thought, Her Highness Joe must have spent a lot of time with the Almighty, her venomous tongue must have picked up at least 80% of her skills. The baby-faced person's face flushed red. Unfortunately, he had only fought with reserve team members, he hadn't fought with an official member of Supreme Alliance. With Bojo's words, he felt a suffocation in his chest, unable to take it down. At this moment, a chuckle came from the sky. "Isn't that easy? Let's find an official member to PK and see Supreme Alliance's strength." It was Watanabe. As he spoke, he glanced at Yusishin. "Captain, am I right?" Yusishin still had his long hair, but there wasn't a hint of femininity. When he glanced at Bojo, his gaze deepened. He yawned lazily. "Watanabe, how many times do you want me to repeat myself? Supreme Alliance is the club's decision, it's just an exchange, not a competition." Watanabe wanted to continue, but Bojo saw his gaze deepen. Bojo watched as the pretty boy's gaze deepened. With a lazy tone, he said, "In China, only the national champion has the right to compete with us." With that, Bojo glanced at the person. Mainan smiled at her and walked over. As he brushed past her, he said, "I'm curious. What's your relationship with Hoshino? Why does he pay so much attention to you?" Bojo glanced up, her lips lifting. Yusishin waited for the youngster to speak. Just then, a familiar voice came from behind. "You can ask me if you want to know." "Captain, when did you start being so nosy?" Yusishin turned towards the person who spoke. He was wearing the same uniform as him, his brows clear but his gaze was filled with warning. Yusishin chuckled. "All right, tell me, what do you see in him?" "I admire his gaming skills." Hoshino glanced at Yusishin. "I've said that before." Yusishin knew that Hoshino was starting to get unhappy. He didn't want to test his limits, so he stuffed his hands into his pockets. "It's just a joke, why are you so serious?" Mr. Yusishin might have gone overboard with his joke. Another voice rang out. It was faint, slightly cold, and had a unique feel to it. Bojo didn't turn. She felt a warmth coming from her wrist, with a faint fragrance and a hint of tobacco. The familiar scent surrounded her along with the warmth. The next second, she saw the beautiful curve of his jaw. "My teammate doesn't know your teammate," Chin Mo said, glancing down at her. He glanced down at Bojo. It's better not to make some jokes, don't you think? Bojo caught a glimpse of something else in his eyes, but before she could get a clear look, the Almighty shifted his gaze away. At the same time, he also let go of her wrist. His side profile was indeed as she had imagined, indifferent without a trace of warmth. Lin Feng, who didn't know how to read people's expressions, leaped over and said to Bojo, "Little Spade, what's going on with you and Captain? Why is he treating you differently? Is he starting to feel bored and cold towards you? Don't worry, if Captain dares to abandon you, I'll stand by your side even if I have to take the risk of rebelling." Lin Feng's voice was soft, only the two of them could hear him. Bojo remained silent. Lin Feng felt that this matter had to be changed. "Look at me, I'm so responsible. After sleeping with Yunhu, I immediately told the surrounding people to stop having any ideas about me. I'm going to have a family in the future, you have to let Captain know about this so that you can take the initiative." Bojo had mentioned that she hated people who showed off their affection the most. She glanced over, her tone calm. "You're the one who takes the initiative. Your lips are already torn, your words aren't convincing. If you don't have the strength to resist Almighty Yun's kisses, just say it, I won't laugh at you." Lin Feng was dealt a huge blow. He took out his phone and hurriedly looked at his lips. F***ck, it was really torn. Didn't Yunhu know how to restrain himself? How was he going to brag like this? "Don't tell me you're like this in bed." Bojo's final attack successfully petrified Lin Feng. When he regained his senses, Lin Feng watched the youngster's back view, his heart stifled. Why were some people like this when they were in a bad mood? Little Bojo wasn't happy. Ever since she entered, he hadn't even glanced at her. Chi Nemo walked in front, his hands in his pockets clenched for a moment before relaxing again. His indifferent gaze met Hoshino's face. They stood in different positions, their gazes intersecting. Feng Yi noticed the change in the situation, speaking with a smile, "Since it's just an exchange and not a competition, let's sit down and have a chat. Our friends from the media have been looking forward to the Japanese's arrival." Yu Cixin stilled, breaking into a smile. "We won't be used to it if there are too many reporters." Feng Yi had expected him to say that, his lips lifting. "Mr. Yu Cixin, don't worry, the Qin group has a media business, it's just an exchange, not a press conference like you are imagining." Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. He had originally wanted to use the exchange as an excuse to take a closer look at Supreme Alliance's strengths. He hadn't expected them to use this as an excuse. It was no wonder Supreme Alliance was the wealthiest team in the industry. Supreme Alliance's manager was indeed an unscrupulous businessman. Actually, that wasn't the only reason Feng Yi had called the media over. It was because of Qin Mo's abnormal state. The media was there to remind Boss Qin that even if they had a conflict, it couldn't be displayed in front of other teams. Both of them were able to keep their composure. But because of their composure, Feng Yi was worried they would explode. After all, no one had ever been able to guess young Master Qin's thoughts correctly. A meeting between two teams, one of which was the Japanese, would be newsworthy. Even if the entire Japanese team wasn't present, Hoshino and Yu Cixin represented the entire Japanese team. Their captain and vice-captain were world-class esports experts who rarely showed their faces. Every word would become a headline in esports. The dull-faced man couldn't be rash even if he wanted to compete with Bojo. Both teams were good-looking, even if there was enmity between them, it wouldn't be displayed at such a moment. Etiquette was a basic rule of etiquette for both teams. Hence, it was a real exchange. Bojo wasn't interested in conversing. She sat very close to Hoshino and turned to glance at him. Hoshino could guess what she wanted to ask, sending a message over. "I found out about Rao Rome, I'll send you the information when I get back." Bojo replied, "Okay." The receptionist walked over with a tray of fruits and tea. Feng Yi had arranged for this to be a friendly gesture. But the moment the receptionist placed the tray in front of Bojiu, Hoshino interrupted. Hoshino suddenly said, "She doesn't eat peaches." In that instant, the receptionist wasn't the only one who froze. Even Lin Feng and the others turned towards Hoshino. How did he know Little Spade didn't eat peaches? They had interacted with Little Spade for so long and yet, he didn't seem to eat peaches. After all, Little Spade wasn't a picky eater. Hoshino seemed familiar with something they didn't know. Even though Lin Feng was naive, he was still sensitive to such matters. Did they know each other? That was his first reaction. On Qin Mo's side, the hand holding the teacup froze. He lifted his eyes and looked at the youngster indifferently. Bojiu knew she couldn't let the Almighty see through her. Hence, she reached for a peach slice and placed it in her mouth. In the past, she hadn't been able to eat peaches as they would break out in rashes. But this was different. Bojiu lowered her lids, swallowing the peach slice before taking a sip of tea. Hoshino's reaction was quick. He smiled naturally and added, "Watanabe, did you forget how you said it wasn't nutritious the last time you ate peaches?" Watanabe pointed to himself. Was that true? It seemed like there was, so he nodded. Everyone was enlightened. So he was referring to Watanabe. They had assumed Hoshino was referring to Little Spade. It was a beautiful misunderstanding. Qin Mo retracted his gaze. But he didn't release his grip. He knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. There was someone who knew him better than him. Or perhaps. Chapter 961. Qin Mo's gaze turned cold. There was an obvious change in the atmosphere. His pitch-black eyebrows were raised, and his expression was frosty. Sitting beside him was Lin Feng, the one who didn't know how to read people's expressions. He turned towards Hoshino. "I heard from Mr. Hoshino that you admire our Little Spade." Hoshino didn't avoid the question. Instead, he turned to Bojiu and smiled faintly. "Yes." When Hoshino said the word, "yes," Qin Mo's gaze deepened. Lin Feng still wanted to ask something, but he was stunned by the cold aura emanating from his captain. He could only shrink his head back. But even if Lin Feng didn't ask, it didn't mean Hoshino wouldn't continue. He seemed to have something to say to his fans since there were reporters around. "I've watched every single one of Spade Z's matches. Be it in terms of skill or character, he is worthy of a battle with the Japanese. At the same time, I hope Supreme Alliance can win the National League, which is also the reason I came to Supreme Alliance. I want to have a match with him." The Japanese vice-captain thought so highly of him. If this video was broadcasted, to a certain extent, it would definitely reduce the existence of some anti-fans. After all, Hoshino's words were right there. His fans would also treat Spade Z as a decent opponent. Most importantly, it was time for some people to calm down. Even Hoshino recognized Spade Z's ability. Those who had been saying that Bojiu had gotten to where she was because of their relationship had to think twice before they spoke, even if they weren't willing to admit it. Japan's influence in the esports industry. The strongest player in Asia had never failed before. Even the video of Hoshino's 1v3 against Xiangnan team was still on the internet. Almost everyone knew that he was a very low-key person. For him to give such an evaluation to Spade Z, most of the rumors would collapse on their own. Sensing the value of the news, the media at the scene immediately started a live broadcast. After all, they didn't expect Hoshino to admire a newcomer so much. For some reason, Feng Yi felt that it was dangerous to continue this topic. He glanced at his boss's side profile and forcefully changed the topic. "Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Hoshino. Supreme Alliance will fight well in the upcoming finals. It seems like Supreme Alliance is confident in themselves. The person who said this was Yu Cixin. When he smiled, he gave off a dangerous vibe like that of a wild leopard. When he said this, he looked at Qin Emo. If Hoshino wanted to play against Spade Z, he wanted to see just how powerful the legendary 3000 knife cutting was. Watching other people's matches, one could only see the surface. If one didn't fight personally, how would one know who was stronger? Facing such a gaze, Qin Mo's handsome face didn't change at all. It seemed as though no matter what Yu Cixin said, it wouldn't affect him. This made Yu Cixin raise his eyebrows. He really wanted to fight with this team that made Hoshino look at them in a different light. On one hand, he wanted to understand why Hoshino was so interested in this team. On the other hand, he knew that Qin Mo's win rate was higher than his in the individual competition records. Qin Mo's name had once been a legend in the esports industry. They had thought that they would be able to compete with this person back then, but they didn't expect Supreme Alliance to not even make it to the national finals. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for the Japanese to win that match. At that time, some of the seniors were still glad that Supreme Alliance didn't participate. But in his eyes, Hoshino was the person he wanted to study the most. As for Qin Mo, he was a suitable opponent. Yu Cixin lifted the edge of his lips. The reporters filmed the scene and pulled the topic back to Hoshino. Almighty Hoshino admires Spade so much, but he doesn't seem to have interacted with Spade before. Hoshino laughed, taking out his phone and showing them the screen. I've followed him, but Spade hasn't replied. I'm still waiting. He really followed him. Why didn't they know? The reporters at the scene felt that their ability to capture news was terrible. Unbeknownst to them, Hoshino had added him before he came to the club. It was to make everything seem logical. Bo Jiu, who was familiar with him, understood his thoughts quickly. Even without any verbal communication, just a glance was enough to know what he was thinking, making everything seem logical. Bo Jiu smiled. I don't usually use the official Weibo account, I'm going to reply now. With that, she took out her phone, her slender and fair fingers unlocking the screen. After logging in, she clicked on the latest follow. It was a simple exchange of fans, but it immediately caused a wave of discussion online. Especially Hoshino's fans. My almighty Hoshino actually follows other teams, that doesn't make sense. Who is this Spade Z? I've never heard of him, is he from our country? I just went to search, he's the FC King of China's Zone C, Supreme Alliance's super rookie. Almighty Hoshino is interested in him. Previous poster, don't go off topic, I think it's a friendly follow. When has almighty Hoshino ever followed others? I didn't see him like this during the International League. Take a look at the interview online. Almighty Hoshino said he wants to have a good match with Spade Z, he must be strong if he can attract almighty Hoshino's interest. I've decided to take a look at this Chinese player. Faced with the sudden visit, the fans of Spade official fan club were a little confused, but that didn't stop them from welcoming him in a friendly manner. In an instant, Bo Jiu's negative comments on the internet lessened. After all, Hoshino was the first to follow Bo Jiu. With the addition of the interview, the topic of discussion soared. The media seized on this point, hoping for more interaction between Bo Jiu and Hoshino. Lin Feng, who was sitting beside Qin Mo, felt a chill starting from his neck. Even his scalp felt numb. It wasn't because of anything else, but his captain's grip on the teacup tightened, his eyes losing the last bit of warmth. Lin Feng saw with his own eyes that a layer of frost covered that handsome face in an instant. Qin Mo looked in the direction of the two, his cold and noble side profile expressionless. His gaze was deep and unmoving. Lin Feng could understand his captain's feelings. Hoshino was treating Little Spade too well. But according to Little Spade, wasn't his captain starting to give Little Spade the cold shoulder? Why did he care so much? Lin Feng felt that the relationship between two men was even more complicated than the relationship between a straight man and a woman. He couldn't analyze it, so he just shrunk his neck and acted as the background. This was to prevent the captain from giving him a look when he said something wrong and letting him experience it himself. Fortunately, the interview wasn't long. If not, Lin Feng suspected that the teacup would be crushed by his captain. Yu Cixin was the first to stand up. He stuffed a hand into his pocket and looked at Qin Mo. I hope the next time we meet Supreme Alliance, it will be on an esports competition. By the way, Mr. Qin, have you thought of a way to deal with Xiangnan? Your team doesn't seem to be mature. The competition is about skills, not maturity. Qin Mo's voice was calm. His words stopped Yu Cixin from probing further. He smiled. Just as he was about to turn his head and ask Hoshino to leave, he saw that the tripod was showing signs of loosening. It looked like it was about to fall. Bojio and Hoshino were still standing under the tripod. Qin Mo had obviously noticed it earlier than Yu Cixin because the moment Yu Cixin's pupils constricted, Qin Mo had already moved. What he hadn't expected was that at that moment, the youngster moved as well. Her movements were extremely fast, just like what he had seen countless times. Whether it was her landing or her focus, they were all beautiful, including her reaching out to grab Hoshino's wrist and stepping to the side, using her back to block him. It was reflected in Qin Mo's eyes. At that moment, he remembered the start of the Cold War. He hadn't taken the initiative to look for her ever since. He hadn't taken the initiative to call or send any messages either. When he saw her, he would brush past her. He wouldn't even smile as a passerby. But she definitely didn't know. He was in so much pain. Because in her eyes, there was someone more important. There was a dull thud. Qin Mo's shoulder withstood the pressure. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even the staff member who was originally in charge of the camera showed a terrified expression. No one had expected the camera to malfunction. Everyone's face was pale. They covered their mouths as they watched the scene unfold. When Bojio heard the noise, she turned over and saw the Almighty standing behind her, blocking the thing for her. He looked into her eyes, his thick brows furrowed slightly from the pain. His aura was burning brightly. His eyes were as clear and deep as the sea, tinged with a faint ink that could drown a person. His handsome face gradually turned pale under the light. The paler his skin was, the harder it was for people to look away from him. It was as though she could see his thoughts through his skin. Bojio suddenly realized something. She let go of Hoshino and stood up, opening her mouth to explain. Qin Mo had already kicked the camera away, heading towards the exit, leaving her with nothing but coldness. This time, Bojio didn't hesitate. She chased after him. Hoshino chuckled, straightening himself and turning to the dumbfounded crowd. I never expected Spade Z to be so skilled in real life. Fortunately, Hoshino was there to smooth things over. Otherwise, Feng Yi wouldn't know how to continue the conversation. The Japanese had met with an accident in their territory. If the news got out, the consequences would be dire. Right now, Feng Yi was thankful for Little Spade's subconscious action. If it had been the other way around and Hoshino had protected Little Spade, Supreme Alliance would have been embroiled in a series of fights between anti-fans. The consequences would have been dire. Yu Cixin's emotions had already changed. He immediately rushed over and pulled Hoshino over. His voice was a little deep. How are you? Are you hurt? I'm fine. Hoshino turned, smiling faintly at Feng Yi. Fortunately, Spade was here, help me thank her. Yu Cixin's gaze dimmed. He glanced at the camera, his expression dark. But that was it. The media reports were basically about an accident during the interview and how Spade Z had protected Hoshino. Feng Yi's situation was much easier to deal with, but he was more worried about young Master Qin's health. Even if he hadn't used much strength, the back of young Master Qin's shoulder should have been red. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was young Master Qin's back view, which seemed to have lost all his warmth. But what Feng Yi didn't expect was that even so, that person still maintained a trace of rationality. No, that wasn't right, it wasn't rationality, it was more like digging 3 feet into the ground to find a person. Because when he received the call, the voice on the other side of the phone was extremely cold. Go check, who touched the camera's tripod? I'll go check the video now. Feng Yi knew that this happened because of his incompetence as a manager. But he didn't expect such a problem to happen in the Qin Group Club. After all, no one in Jiang City dared to do such things in front of the Qin family. But Feng Yi wasn't sure if this incident was targeted at the Supreme Alliance or Little Spade. But no matter which one it was targeted at, in young Master Qin's eyes, it was probably a death sentence. Other than Qin Mo, it was obvious that Hoshino and Yu Cixin had realized something. The former was worried that this attack was targeted at Zi. She had experienced too many similar incidents and was worried that this attack was targeted at Zi. The latter was born in a country, his beast-like instincts made it hard for him not to think of conspiracies. But Yu Cixin knew that such a childish attack wouldn't be targeted at his identity. That position was either to disqualify Hoshino or to disqualify Spade Zi. Based on the current situation, the latter was more likely. If Spade Zi and Qin Mo hadn't blocked it, Yu Cixin would have suspected Supreme Alliance. But on second thought, if one of them was injured here, Supreme Alliance would suffer the greatest loss. Hence, this attack was definitely targeted at Spade Zi. Yu Cixin raised a brow. With the youngster's skills, he could have easily avoided the tripod, but because he was afraid Hoshino would be injured, he used his back to block it. Was this really Spade Zi's reaction after analyzing the pros and cons and not his instinct? If it was instinct, Hoshino and this Spade Zi. Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. He didn't know that Hoshino was hiding something from him. Time trickled by. Bojiu rushed out and watched as the person hung up the phone. Without turning back, she held onto the railing with one hand and jumped over. But the person was already in the car and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Bojiu rushed over, her long legs blocking the car door. Her eyes were dark and she was about to speak. Chapter 962. Bojiu managed to stop him with much difficulty. Of course, she wasn't going to let him leave just like that. Brother Mo, your instinctive reaction wasn't bad, Qin Mo said, his gaze deep and his voice cold. Qin Mo spoke again, his gaze deep and his voice cold. Should I be asking you how you met Hoshino? I don't even know you can't eat peaches. How many things have you been hiding from me? Do you want me to tell you everything? Every time I don't contact you, you don't take the initiative to contact me either. You do what you want to do and aren't affected by anything. I'm different. Every time I'm in a meeting, I'm thinking about what this person is doing. Why isn't she coaxing me? As long as she sends a word, even if it's just a phone call, a lot of things can be changed. In the end, you just don't want to reconcile, right? Bojiu's fingers froze. She didn't know how to reply because the Almighty had hit the nail on the head. Qin Mo glanced at her and slowly turned his face. His black hair hung down, blocking his eyes. No one could see his expression. Since you don't want to be close to me, we will separate as you wish. Both of us probably don't like people who cling to us. Clingy, these 4 words. Bojiu lost most of her energy. But instead of saying it for Bojiu, it was more appropriate to say it was for himself. Sometimes, even with all his sincerity and hard work, it only proved that the other party didn't care. Especially after witnessing the scene just now. Chin Mo reached out to close the car door. After a moment of silence, his voice was cold. Drive. The driver wasn't from the same family. When he started the car, he didn't dare to look behind him. The coldness emanating from Boss Chin seemed to be able to freeze him. Bojio watched as the black Land Rover disappeared into the parking lot. After a long time, she walked out, her steps getting heavier. It was as though she had returned to her younger days. She had wanted to be alone but had been forced to leave with her father. She wanted to bend down because it wouldn't hurt so much. But Bojio knew that to her, she could bend over anything except her waist. The burden she carried wouldn't allow her to do that. Bojio inhaled deeply, leaning against the wall for a while. She wanted to smoke but realized there was only a lollipop in her pocket. It was the one the Almighty had bought for her. Bojio took it out and held it in her hands. She thought she would never forget it. There was a woman who always kept 2 candies in her coat pocket because she liked candy. He was clearly such a cold and noble person who never ate sweets. Bojio reached out and pressed down on her silver fringe. When she opened her eyes again, there was an obvious change in her pupils. He pressed the familiar string of numbers on his phone. Hoshino, who was standing beside Yusishin, took a step back. I'm going to relieve myself. Yusishin raised his eyebrows and said with an indescribable evil aura, "Be careful." Hoshino glanced at him. Got it. This person always treated others like porcelain dolls. It was interesting. Crossing the corridor, Hoshino took out the vibrating phone from his pocket and placed it beside his ear. Hello, Z, who knows about your team coming today? Bojio's questions were always direct. Hoshino knew what she was getting at. The reason should be within Supreme Alliance. Our visit was decided by Captain at the last minute and the other members aren't aware of it yet. Hence, the person who tampered with the camera must be someone from here. Other than the cameraman, the only person in charge is the floor supervisor. But from the looks of it, the person must have escaped. After the disguise, it would be hard to leave a trace even with the camera. Bojio was calm. That organization has their eyes on Supreme Alliance. More accurately, they have their eyes on me but they wouldn't know I'm Z. Which means someone is trying to drag me down to deal a heavy blow to Supreme Alliance. I'm sure you have found out what exactly happened to Chin Mo. Right from the start, Bojio had wanted to know why her puppy had lost his memory. Now, she wanted to know even more. Her intuition told her that the terrorist organization's main target this time was the Almighty. Hoshino chuckled lightly. Z, you're as sharp as ever. I did find some information regarding Chin Mo and the person who impersonated you. They knew each other and almost became lovers. Hoshino chuckled lightly. Z, you're as sharp as ever. Lovers. Bojio's fingers stilled, her gaze wavering. Hoshino's voice was still ringing in her ears. But for some reason, Chin Mo started to treat this person coldly. It could even be said that he hated her. Bojio lowered her voice. That isn't strange. According to the Almighty, he wouldn't tolerate a criminal who hacked into someone else's computer. It has nothing to do with that. Hoshino paused when he heard the voice. Do you want to hear my analysis? MH? Hoshino sighed inwardly when he heard the dispirited reply. He broke into a faint smile. Z, it's such a waste of your intelligence. You're really clueless when it comes to relationships. Before she could open her mouth, Hoshino continued. Chin Mo's matter is covered up deeply. Even with your identity, the information we can find is limited. That means we are only looking at the surface. What happened to Chin Mo is something only he knows, so the theory of lovers doesn't hold water. The main point is Z, the person who impersonated you this time, her brother was dealt with by you. At that time, someone exposed the hacker's hidden information to some powerful people, using the internet to control people's thoughts, just like the maiden's sacrifice. Even though the method is different, the truth is the same, distorting the truth and causing people to lose their bottom line. An entire school of students to a certain extent become people who can harm others at any time, but they don't know it. Do you still remember what you said at the time? The scariest thing isn't the devil but the human heart. Bojo glanced up, her gaze deepening. So it's him. Hoshino paused. Back then, you and Chin Mo worked together to send her brother to prison. Now that she's back, her target is Chin Mo, revenge. Bojo's handsome face was especially distinct under the sunlight. Her brother killed many people, it seems like she has inherited his legacy. Hoshino glanced out the window. It wasn't just revenge, she was even more vicious than her brother. She wanted Chin Mo. In order to get what she wanted, she destroyed everything around her. Human lives weren't important to her, the dignity and innocence of others were just tools to be used. The maiden's sacrifice had destroyed too many people. Her first target wasn't the young lady you saved but Shui Yaoyao from your team. At that time, she created a small forum to discuss Shui Yaoyao's actions. Back then, she created a small forum to discuss Shui Yaoyao. Her target was always those who were still working hard. You should understand what her brother and she wanted to destroy. They wanted to control the world because that is how human nature is. But back then, she was just testing, a small test that caused Shui Yaoyao to be wronged for a few months. After that, she made her move in Tokyo. When she felt that it was about time, she came to China and started the official maiden sacrifice. This world shouldn't be like this. Some people clench their teeth and live their lives. They can't speak the truth after being oppressed because the moment they speak, people will jump out to oppose them. There are others who commit murder, commit arson, steal other people's hard work, steal other people's works, they will be forgiven. It won't be like this forever, Bojo interrupted. If not, what's the point of our existence? That's right. Hoshino laughed, his eyes bright and his teeth white. It won't be like this forever, so it's time for us to take action. What do you intend to do with Li Shui? She definitely won't admit to her crimes and those who don't care about plagiarism will try their best to clear her name. Bojo raised her hand, shielding her eyes from the glaring sunlight. When you weren't around, I hired a good lawyer. His surname is Bai and he has never lost a case. If Li Shui doesn't admit to her crimes, we will sue her until she does. Her mother knows that even if she wins the case, the compensation would be minimal. Based on Li Shui's personality, she might not even apologize and the people who scolded her will continue to scold her. But that isn't important. What's important is that the people who care about her know that there is still justice in this world. They protected the most important thing for the person they love. That person can finally rest in peace. It's strange that you hired a lawyer. Hoshino stuffed a hand into his pocket. It seems like Chin Mo has affected you quite a bit. Do you like him? At first, Hoshino assumed that the person on the other end would hesitate, even if it was just for a second. But she didn't. When she spoke, there wasn't a hint of hesitation. Yes, I like him a lot. I want to kidnap him and bring him back to the Fifth Avenue. Fortunately, I'm still rational and didn't carry out the plan. But I don't know if I can control myself in the future. She was so honest that he didn't know how to reply. Hoshino supported his forehead with his long and fair fingers, his lips lifting. In that moment, he didn't know how to reconcile his feelings. The person who had always been a loner finally had someone she liked. But that person wasn't him. Hoshino inhaled deeply. Don't torture us single dogs. But we won't be together. Hoshino didn't know how to reply to her next words. He's from the police and I'm an international criminal. In the movies, princes and princesses are always together, witch prince and evil dragon are together. The prince will only kill the evil dragon but the Almighty won't kill me. I'm so handsome, he won't want to see me or hide far away from me. It was worse than this. Bojo didn't tell Hoshino her last sentence. Instead, she changed the topic. Do you have a photo of that person? Hoshino knew who she was referring to even without Bojo's explanation. There are only some blurry ones. She is like her brother, never leaving behind any photos. But do you remember the address you gave me previously? It's an internet cafe beside Chin Mo's university. She should be staying nearby. She might even be staying in school. Bojo's eyes twitched. She rented a house outside but doesn't stay there. When she isn't on a mission, she stays in school. Even if she is on a mission, the school's network would be more convenient since the public IP isn't easy to locate. Hoshino caressed his phone. You think she's a student? 90%. Bojo glanced down at the lollipop in her right hand. If she's a student, it would be a useful disguise for her. Besides, the university isn't far from number 1 middle school, making it easier for her to locate her target and help her. More importantly, it's Chin Mo's school. You mentioned that if she wants to get him, the best way would be to become his schoolmate or join Supreme Alliance like I did. There are only 2 females in Supreme Alliance, me and Yao Yao. That eliminates the possibility of her being in Supreme Alliance. The only other possibility left is that she's his schoolmate. Hoshino retracted his gaze from the window. I understand what you mean. I'll focus on the investigation. Someone is coming, take care of yourself. I'm hanging up. Bojo hung up. She glanced at the phone screen. She resisted the urge to call Chin Mo. She continued to use the method to keep herself busy. But this time, while she was busy, Hoshino's words kept flashing through her mind. They had almost become lovers. Which meant that the Almighty knew her. But the Almighty seemed to have forgotten about it. How did that happen? What exactly happened back then? Since Hoshino hadn't been able to find anything, she could only hack into the data of some special forces, and since that person liked to impersonate her so much, she could only use her own methods to prove who was the real one. Now that she knew her target was the Almighty, she couldn't let that person continue to roam free. She had to settle this matter before she left. Even if the Almighty didn't want to talk to her anymore, the sun moved west. The black Land Rover didn't drive back to the Chin family's house. Instead, it stopped at a bar. The bar was near the school. Chin Mo didn't look at his injured back. He sat at the bar counter, tugged his tie, and ordered a row of drinks. The driver had already been sent away. Chin Mo didn't show much emotion even when he was drinking. But his elegant and handsome side profile was clearly much colder. He drank one glass after another, as though that was the only way his back wouldn't hurt so much. He thought that the guy must not have even noticed that he was injured. Because at that moment, she probably only had Hoshino in her eyes. Chin Mo laughed softly. His lips were slightly lifted, but there wasn't a hint of a smile. Instead, there was a sense of decadence and loneliness. Chapter 963. In the darkest corner of the bar, a girl came in after Chin Mo. She sat there and watched Chin Mo for a long time before breaking into a sweet smile. She walked towards Chin Mo with her beautiful eyes. Senior Chin, I didn't expect to meet you here. Chin Mo shifted his gaze away from the wine glass, sweeping her a glance. He didn't say a word. You should have forgotten my name. The last time I almost fell down the stairs, you were the one who supported me from behind. The girl tilted her head. She was wearing a skirt and had short hair. Her fingers were slender and looked like a cello player. She smiled at Qin Mo as though she wasn't bothered by his coldness. I'm Fan Jia, senior brother Qin, remember me this time. Qin Mo remained silent, pushing his glass over, gesturing for the bartender to continue. Fan Jia chuckled lightly. She stood at the side, her eyes bright and teeth white. Senior Qin, you don't look happy. Do you want to say it? It will make you feel better. In that instant, something surged in Qin Mo's mind. He looked at the girl and found her familiar. She had short hair and the same face shape as that fellow. But her eyes weren't like that fellow's. They were extremely dark and clear like water. He started to think about that fellow again. Little Fuzhou, who haunted him. That fellow who looked like a multiplication table. Qin Mo furrowed his brows. He was supposed to be impatient, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes when he thought of someone. Senior Qin, what's wrong with your back? Are you injured? Fan Jia reached out. Qin Mo glanced over, his gaze icy. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Fan Jia blushed but didn't get angry. I'm just worried about you. When Qin Mo heard this, he stood up, picked up his jacket and made a call. He didn't know who he was calling, but he said faintly, I drank too much, come and pick me up. Lin Feng was baffled when he picked up the call. After all, he never thought that his captain would call him. It seemed like he really had too much to drink. Lin Feng's heart churned. He had witnessed the entire scene today. The unhappiness between his captain and Little Spade was obvious. Little Spade was really a withered spade. Between being punished by his captain and being a loyal brother, Lin Feng chose the latter and called Bojo. Hello, Little Spade. Don't say I'm not loyal, there is a bright path for you to sleep with Captain again. It depends on your courage. Lin Feng crossed his legs as he spoke. Captain is drunk. His coordinates are at the bar next to a university. He's getting someone to pick him up. Do you want to go? Bojo didn't hesitate. Her reply made Lin Feng mutter, aren't you afraid of death? Only you would dare to target Captain. I'm near a university, it's convenient to head over. I'll take a cab now. She added, in the future, if you wish to sleep with Almighty Yun, I'll help you. Lin Feng roared in his heart. I'm a straight guy, I don't want to sleep with my own brothers. Unfortunately, the phone had already been hung up. Chapter 964. After Bojo hung up, she hopped into a cab. Sir, the White Knight Bar near a university. At this hour, the traffic was starting to get congested. The cab wasn't going fast. She didn't understand why the Almighty would call Lin Feng, but only a naive person like Lin Feng would ask her to fetch the Almighty. When Bojo alighted, she was prepared for the Almighty's cold stare. After leaving the club, the Almighty went straight to the bar, clearly in a bad mood. He had been like this when he had been young. When he was unhappy, he would reject others. No matter how she tried to coax him, he wouldn't budge. What a troublesome little vixen. Back then, she had been thick-skinned. But from the looks of it, she wasn't that thick-skinned. Bojo glanced down at the time on her watch before walking briskly towards the bar. She bypassed the car parked in front of the door and saw a cold figure standing under the neon lights. It was a very noble and different person. Bojo prepared herself mentally. Basically, she was prepared to be rejected. She took another step forward. At this moment, she saw him clearly. The Almighty's battle uniform was half open, revealing the white t-shirt underneath. His short black hair and tall nose showed off his beautiful side profile. His facial features were clear, and his eyebrows were clear and his eyes were clear. He held a cigarette between his slender and fair fingers. Because he had drunk some alcohol, his fringe drooped down, reflecting his deep eyes, making him look even more wanton and unrestrained. The Almighty raised his eyes and glanced at her. It was obvious that he had already sensed her presence. Bo Jiao could hear her heartbeat. She thought of many things she wanted to say, but when she saw the person behind the Almighty, she paused. It was a short-haired girl with a sweet appearance. She seemed to have been standing there for a while, a bright smile on her face. She seemed to be talking to the Almighty. She could vaguely hear the word senior. This was. Bo Jiao paused. She wasn't sure how the girl had come. Was she drinking with the Almighty? Bo Jiao couldn't be blamed for thinking that way. She had never seen anyone so close to the Almighty. Even though they hadn't had any physical contact, there was an indescribable feeling. But there was an indescribable feeling. It seemed like they knew each other. Based on her understanding of the Almighty, if he really hated someone, he would definitely ask the other party to leave. Did the Almighty come alone or did he have a date? Bo Jiao wasn't sure if she should continue walking over. At this moment, the girl also raised her eyes. At first, she was surprised that Gu Shijiu would appear. Then, she smiled, revealing her dimples. Senior, that's Spade Z, right? He's even more handsome in real life. Qin Mo remained silent. Bo Jiao suddenly felt that her presence was unnecessary. Her heart sank and she was about to turn. How long do you want me to stand here alone? He asked in a low and familiar voice. Bo Jiao glanced up. She wasn't sure if he was talking to her. Besides, he didn't seem happy that she was here. The man stubbed out the cigarette in his hand and threw it into the dustbin. He pulled open his uniform jacket and walked towards her. She didn't even have the time to react before he walked towards her. Her vision darkened as someone covered her with a jacket. Bo Jiao was about to move. But the voice beside her ears was still cold. Don't move, I don't want to see you now. Bo Jiao's fingers stilled. She didn't know what to do. As expected, it wasn't a good feeling to be hated by the Almighty. She was so handsome that even the Almighty didn't want to see her face. In the future, she wouldn't be able to use this face to win any benefits. Since when did her face become a minus factor? Bo Jiao took a moment. It was too difficult for her to stay still. Just as she was about to take a step, she saw the person walking towards her from under the jacket. Before she could do anything, she felt herself being picked up by someone. This. Didn't he not want to see her? Why, Brother Mo, he ignored her, but she could feel his familiar peppermint tobacco scent lingering at the tip of her nose. Bo Jiao didn't move. The tip of her nose touched Qin Mo's chest through the jacket. She couldn't see anything as he carried her. Her fingers tightened on the jacket, her heart racing. She didn't understand what the Almighty meant. Was he really going to throw her into the dustbin? After all, the Almighty had been looking at her with disdain, as though he wanted to get rid of her. Speaking of which, why wasn't the Almighty surprised that she was the one who came to fetch him and not the naive Lin Feng? Just as Bo Jiao was thinking about it, she felt herself being placed on the seat of a car. It was probably the Land Rover she was familiar with. Because of the surrounding environment, even if she couldn't see it in front of her, she knew that the furnishings around her were familiar to her. Just as she was about to say something, her chin was lifted. After the jacket was slightly lifted, a cold kiss came in. Bo Jiao's pupils wavered. Her lips were pried open. All she could feel was the aroma of the wine pouring in, and the tipsy feeling made her lose all her thoughts at that moment. The tip of their tongues touched, bringing with it a scent that she hadn't felt for a long time. Bo Jiao could only lean against the seat, unaware of the situation around her. Half her face was covered by the jacket and she was in a sorry state from the kiss. The Land Rover was parked in the parking lot marked out by the bar. There were many people passing by. Chi Nemo was wearing a white t-shirt, bending over and kissing. Who knew how many people stopped in their direction? That kind of scene seemed to only appear in comics. But no matter how curious they were, they didn't know what the youngster looked like. How exactly did he think of such a way of kissing? They could vaguely see the figure but not the face. But just by looking at the figure, they were definitely good-looking, especially Chi Mo's long legs and waist. His half-bent waist exuded an innate aura. Even his kiss was domineering. Those who whistled and those who tossed and turned did it. Chi Nemo acted as though there was no one else around, kissing her until she was exhausted. After a while, he released her and pinched her chin again. He bit her lips, continuing to taste the sweetness that she didn't want to let go of. Bojo didn't know what was going on around her, allowing Chi Nemo to kiss her. Gradually, she lost all her strength. The sounds seemed to have weakened. No matter how loud they were, they became the background in her ears. It was as though there was such a person in this world. When he kissed you, you could only hear your own heartbeat. Everyone saw the kissing scene. Fan Jia, who was standing not far away, saw the entire scene. Her fingers tightened, and when it reached a certain level, her eyes overflowed with venom. She really didn't expect that after planning for such a long time, a chance to drink alone with him, it would be gone just like that. And why was Chi Nemo still in such a state after Spade Z saved Hoshino? She had received news that the two of them were in a cold war. And why was he starting to like boys? That person clearly liked girls. She had always thought it was because of the novelty. The novelty was the excitement that the youngster brought him. Because in the esports scene, he probably hadn't met such a person. The FC King of Zone C, it was hard not to notice this title. She had seen young Master Fu play before, it was no wonder he was interested. Fan Jia had always known that other than Z, Chi Nemo was most interested in esports. In the past, she had tried to get close to him, but it hadn't been effective. This young master of the Fu family had only occupied that position because he had appeared in the most vacant period of his life. He was really lucky. Fan Jia stood there, her gaze deepening. Watching him kiss someone made her want to kill the person he was kissing. It seemed like she hadn't been forceful enough. Fan Jia's gaze deepened, but she didn't show any emotions. It was time to find an alliance. Fu Zhongyi was the best candidate. Amidst the envious whistles, Fang Jia disappeared into the night. She believed that as long as she continued to lay low, she would be able to obtain that person completely. She would let young Master Fu have him for a few days, she would snatch him back. Because she knew better than anyone what could attract his interest, in the Land Rover. Bojo sat there, watching the pair of eyes that were as beautiful as the stars, panting softly. She didn't know how she had offended the Almighty. His coat covered him again, and his whole body was covered. Through the jacket, the Almighty's lips pressed against her, the fragrance of sandalwood lingering in her bones. His voice was still cold. Who asked you to appear? He didn't want her to show her face. Bojo wanted to lift her lids, but her head was already pressed into his embrace. Then she heard the Almighty on the phone. Drive over. There was a driver. Then why did he get Lin Feng to fetch him? It seemed like the Almighty had drunk too much. Bojo arched a brow, feeling as though the Almighty was looking in her direction. But she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Actually, his thoughts were simple. The moment he saw that person's face, he would lose his principles. Hence, he didn't want to see it. But because of that person in his arms, many feelings changed. The pressure on his chest disappeared without a trace. Even if he didn't see it, he could imagine her gloomy expression. He would leave her alone. That way, he wouldn't be able to see through her thoughts. Chi Mo's gaze deepened at the thought of her instinctive protection. After all, she was the most obedient when she was gloomy. Bojo couldn't see any of this, which was indeed gloomy. She couldn't see anything. She tilted her head and heard the sound of the car. After walking for a while, she asked, "Brother Mo, when can I show my face?" Chapter 965. But Bojo knew it was a light punishment. She sat there for a while. When she felt it was enough, she tried to suggest, "Brother Mo, I think you'll feel better when you see my face. I'm so handsome, I can beautify the air. I don't need you to beautify the air." His voice was slow, his fingers touching her lips through the jacket. "You better be quiet, I don't want to see your face or hear your words, understand?" Understood, who couldn't be its under a little fairy? Bojo nodded, not saying it out loud. She knew the Almighty didn't want to reconcile with her this time. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror more than once. Boss Chin could just ask someone to leave if he didn't want to see them. Why did he have to cover his face? He turned and planted a kiss on the top of her head. He didn't understand the boss's world. Perhaps no one could understand. He liked someone too much and was a proud person. If it had been someone else, he would have ignored them. But this fellow, he forced himself not to think about it but used Lin phone to make her appear. Yes, Chin Mo's phone call wasn't something he would make when he was drunk. As the captain of the Supreme Alliance, he knew every member's personality. When that naive Lin phone received the call, his first reaction would definitely be to inform this fellow. Chin Mo glanced down at the youngster in his arms. He was still thinking about what he should do with her. Since he couldn't think of anything, he decided to bring her home. The Land Rover entered the military courtyard. Bojo's hearing was sensitive, she could hear the sound of the gun. The car stopped. Chin Mo carried the person he had covered with his jacket down and placed her on the bed. Bojo took a moment. The moment she reached her hand out, her lips were kissed again. This time, the kiss was deeper. When her head sank into the pillow, her breathing became erratic. "Our relationship isn't just in bed, understand?" That hoarse voice, accompanied by his breath, landed on her lips. It was still a little cold. "You have to take responsibility for provoking me." Bojo muttered, "I've always been responsible." "Your responsibility is to save Hoshino." Chin Mo's voice was calm. Bojo didn't know how to reply. Chin Mo glanced at her, released her, and stood up. Bojo knew this was the end. She couldn't make up any more stories. Chin Mo's back was facing her as he replied, "Forget it." Bojo's fingers froze. She wanted to say something but it wasn't possible. There was the sound of the door closing. It was obvious that he wanted to chase the guest away. Even though she knew that, she didn't want to move. He maintained this position for a while. It was as if it was absorbing the last bit of sunlight. The night outside began to turn dark. Chin Mo sat in the study room that was just a wall away from his bedroom. Listening to the commotion, he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He held the silver cigarette lighter in his hand, and when he flipped it over, he saw that it was a USB flash drive. If not for Lin Fang's call, she probably didn't even think to ask where he was. Things that were forced would always be very painful to prick. Even the gifts were the same. There was a moment of silence. Chin Mo knew she was about to leave. He smoked a cigarette, as if that was the only way to suppress the boredom. Just as he turned his head, the study room door was pried open. The person who pried open the door stood there. "I'll leave after I help you apply the ointment." Chin Mo extinguished the cigarette, his voice calm. "Someone will be here in a while." Her only excuse to stay was gone. Bojo finally understood that the Almighty didn't want to see her. They had never been so polite with each other. Until a sound from downstairs broke the silence. Movie queen and was back. She walked over when she saw the light in the study room. With just one look, she could see the problem between them. Just as Bojo was about to leave, he grabbed her. "Jo, since you're here, I have something to ask for your opinion. Don't leave today, let's have a good talk." Bojo glanced at Chin Mo, replying, "All right." Chin Mo's clenched fists loosened as the word left his lips. Since they were going to stay, they definitely had to eat dinner. Movie Queen and had already decided to arrange for them to sit together. But that was all in the future. Movie Queen and was smart. She never asked the children what had happened. She did have something to look for Bojo. "I have a movie, the director has asked me twice to be his lobbyist." Movie Queen and added a piece of bacon. "I think the role is suitable for you. Why don't you take on the role and I'll tell you about the weakness of my cold son." Bojo never knew how to reject someone like Movie Queen and, "I have to wait until after the competition but I'm not sure what the situation will be. Besides, I don't know how to act." Once the competition ended, she would find an opportunity to leave. "It doesn't matter." Movie Queen and reached out to pinch the youngster's face. "You don't have to act, the director said you can just sit in front of the computer and play games. You can appear as yourself. That's all, just treat it as a favor." Since Movie Queen and said that, Bojo couldn't reject her. "The director is looking for any sports player." "No, it's a hacker." Movie Queen and was delighted. "In the movie, it's my son. I've always wanted a handsome and caring son like Joe. Your brother Mo is too cold, not cute at all." It wasn't easy to reply. Bojo lowered her head and ate the rice in her bowl. She couldn't help glancing at the empty seat beside her. Deep down, she knew why the Almighty hadn't come down to eat. It was because of her. Chapter 966. The moment Movie Queen and finished her sentence, Bojo's phone rang in her pocket. The unique ringtone made her pause. She whipped her phone out. The caller ID wasn't displayed but the string of numbers was extremely familiar to her. Besides, she knew that Hoshino wouldn't have called her if it wasn't something serious. Bojo turned to Movie Queen and, "Apologies, I have to take a call." Then she stood up. When she reached the entrance, her entire aura changed, especially her eyes, which seemed to be covered with a layer of light. It made her look like a devil in the night, dangerous and mysterious. "Hello." "Something happened to Rao Rong." Hoshino swiped the screen. "Everyone in the esports industry is saying that there's something fishy about your match." "Fishy?" Bojo arched a brow. Hoshino replied, "Someone said that Rao Rong didn't go all out in the match and lost intentionally because someone placed a bet on the match. If Supreme Alliance won, the other party would earn a lot. That isn't all, the crime squad has taken Rao Rong away, claiming that there is evidence pointing towards Rao Rong being the mastermind behind the maiden's sacrifice. The organization wants to push Rao Rong out to divert everyone's attention." Bojo's gaze deepened. The son of a hero shouldn't be treated this way. Rao Rong worked harder than anyone else in that match. If it wasn't for him, the other party would have lost badly. Hoshino broke into a warm smile. "Shall we take action?" Bojo glanced at the sky. "Let's meet outside the police station. It seems like you've already thought of a way to slap them in the face." Hoshino hooked the keys on the table. "I'll prepare the costumes and props, which one do you need?" Bojo took a moment. "A wooden guitar, a white t-shirt, a black trench coat, a mask, hair dye, and a motorcycle, something cool." "What are you going to do?" Hoshino glanced down at the information in his hands. "You're going to use a guitar." Bojo lifted her lips, a hint of devilishness in her eyes. Since I'm returning, I need the audience to prove it. If not, I won't be able to answer to their efforts in impersonating me. You're breaking the rules again. Hoshino's eyes lit up brightly, as though he had been in a daze for a long time. I understand, I'll see you in a bit. See you in a bit. Bojo hung up and turned towards movie Queenan, who was watching her. She felt slightly embarrassed. She wanted to see the Almighty again, but time was tight and he might not want to see her. Bojo knew that the Almighty was still angry and it would be best if she could stay. But compared to that, she had more important matters to attend to. Antian, I have something urgent to attend to, I have to leave. Movie Queenan could tell from Bojo's expression that the youngster had something urgent to attend to. At her age, she was able to see the bigger picture. Alright, you can go ahead. It's time to make my cold son anxious. Otherwise, he will never understand that sincerity is the most important thing in a relationship. Brother Mo is great. It's my fault, I wasn't sincere enough. Movie Queenan watched the youngster's serious expression and couldn't help breaking into a smile. Who would take the blame? Her cold son must have accumulated good fortune in his previous life to have met such a sensible child like Joe. Movie Queenan glanced at the youngster's serious face and couldn't help but laugh. Who would take the blame? Her cold son must have accumulated good fortune in his previous life to have met such a sensible child like Joe. Movie Queenan chuckled. Joe, you'll be at a disadvantage. If he dares to bully you in the future, tell me. I'll be on your side. Movie Queenan chuckled. Joe, you're at a disadvantage. If he dares to bully you in the future, tell me. I'll be on your side. Movie Queenan chuckled. Joe, you'll be at a disadvantage. If he dares to bully you in the future, tell me. I'll be on your side. It had been the same when she had been young. On the surface, she seemed to be at a disadvantage. But in reality, every time something happened, he would be the one shielding her. A family like Madame Anne's had high standards for upbringing. Grandpa was even more so, he had raised the Almighty like a prince. He played the piano well and knew how to play chess. While she had been wandering outside like a clay figurine, the Almighty had come to meet the foreign guests in his little suit. The In family's house was right next to theirs. Even though it was the same villa, the In family's house was clean. Every time she climbed over the wall and knocked over a flower pot, Grandpa would ask and the Almighty would say that he had accidentally knocked it over. There had been one time when she had opened the In family's safe. The Almighty had taken the blame for her. He had been punished by Grandpa to stand for a long time. If it had been the Almighty, he would never have made such a mistake. In his eyes, such mistakes were childish. He had never been punished by Grandpa, and Bojo could still remember the way her little puppy had stood in the middle of the living room. He hadn't been impatient at all. But he hadn't been happy at that time. When he had tugged her hand over, his expression had been cold. Little Bojo, are you an idiot? Bring the medicine box over. Bring me the first aid kit. If I find any blood on your hands on my sheets, I'll throw you out the window. Bojo was used to such threats. She didn't think much of it. Besides, the Almighty had been the one who had bandaged her hand. He probably didn't mind it being dirty. That day, she had hugged her little puppy and slept soundly. Before he had fallen asleep, he had muttered in her ear, "You're so stupid. I guess the safe has to be changed." From that day onwards, all the locks in the In family's house had been changed to electronic. Back then, Bojo had told herself that she would take good care of her little puppy. That was probably the reason why Bojo didn't want to receive that person's hateful gaze one day. Movie Queenan watched as the youngster lowered her gaze. She reached out to push Bojo, a faint smile on her face. She had the demeanor of a mature queen. "All right, you can go now." I'll talk to Brother Mo. Bojo didn't have time to stay any longer. But it was good that she had left. The Almighty would probably come down for dinner after she left. After leaving the military courtyard, Bojo glanced at the time on her phone. Then she hopped into a taxi. As the city lights lit up, the night came to everyone's side. The nightlife in the city center started to get lively. There would always be many people near the commercial plaza. The most eye-catching advertising screens hung on the skyscrapers. Everything was a show of life. In the study room on the second floor of the Chin family's house. Chapter 967. The computer screen lit up, a familiar sound reverberating in the study room. It was the sound of a player entering the game. It could be said that this was the first special effect used in the video. As the video unfolded like a story, the game characters appeared. Chin Mo looked at the two familiar IDs, his eyes widening in shock. This was, before that guy had joined Supreme Alliance, when they had cleared a dungeon together. No. That wasn't right. Chin Mo looked at the video, his game character and the youngster's game character dashing towards the other party's wilderness like two gusts of wind. This wasn't just a video of them clearing the instance. It was all the video clips of the two of them fighting side by side. From the moment they first met to the current National League, every scene was presented in this manner by her. Of course, Chin Mo knew how much time and effort it took to edit these videos. Moreover, some scenes had to be searched. He had originally thought that this was the end. But it wasn't. At the end of the video was the photo they had posted on their official Weibo. A line of words appeared on it. I hope to have someone like you, like the cool breeze in the mountains, like the warm light in the ancient city, from morning to night, from the wilderness to the canyon. As long as it's you, it's all good. Chin Mo didn't head down because he had seen this video clip. It wasn't long, only around 7 to 8 minutes, but it was hard to believe that it was during normal times. But when he saw the last sentence, Chin Mo forgot to move, he just stared at the computer screen. For the first time, he felt that even if it was out of his control, it wasn't a bad thing. His heart seemed to be struck by something. He couldn't help but stand up and walk down the stairs, his eyes scanning the surroundings as though he was looking for someone. There wasn't anyone on the sofa, at the dining table, or even in the kitchen. Chin Mo wanted to search the other side. Movie Queen and walked over and stopped him. You don't have to look, he has left. Chin Mo's fingers paused, his brows furrowing. Left? It should be something urgent, you. Before Movie Queen could finish her sentence, her well-mannered son grabbed his jacket from the sofa and walked out the door without turning back. He was still fuming. It was rare for Movie Queen to be so impatient. She strode over. Son, don't blame me for not reminding you. Joe seemed to have received a call from a friend. It seems like that friend treats Joe pretty well. You have to understand that there are many people who have feelings for Joe. If you continue to be so cold, you might really lose Joe. It's better to have a sense of crisis in a relationship. Even without his mother's reminder, Chin Mo already knew. Otherwise, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Chin Mo could get whatever he wanted and had the dominant position in this relationship. But in reality, if anything happened, she would be the one who could leave easily. However, it was enough. After Chin Mo saw the video, he told himself that since she didn't want to say something, there was no need to say it. Including Hoshino. All he wanted to do now was find that girl, take her in his arms, and tell her that she belonged to him. Chapter 968. In the early summer, every city had its own way of life. Northerners liked to drink beer with spicy crayfish and meat skewers. Southerners rarely ate spicy food, but they would go shopping with a few girlfriends. Although these were different, there were still similarities. There would be many people gathered in the commercial square of every city. It was even more so in a metropolis like Zhongqing. The big screen hanging on the building was very high visibility. Not only the people standing there, but even the cars going back and forth could see clearly what was on it. Under normal circumstances, it would be the advertisements of various celebrities. At around 7 p.m., the sky was not dark yet. This was the time when Zhongqing was the most congested. In the middle of the bustling street, located in the commercial city center, was a landmark of China. Cars that came here would have to wait for a period of time even if they were unwilling. Everyone knew the reason. It was too risky. The commercial square had a wide range of activities. There were coffee shops like Starbucks, Burger King, etc. There was also a small fountain in the middle. Many people were walking back and forth. There were young people chatting, old people with children, and even a group of cool high school students playing skateboards. At this time, a pure black tomahawk, like a beautiful wild leopard, stopped in front of the fountain with a swoosh, and a handsome tail swing attracted almost everyone's attention. In front of everyone was a tall and straight young man. His long legs supported himself by the side of the motorcycle. Then, he got off the motorcycle nimbly and took off his helmet, revealing a pair of deep peach blossom eyes. The young man was wearing a black mask, so people couldn't see his face clearly. Even so, just looking at his figure made people's hearts beat faster. So handsome. This was the exclamation of the girls. The guy at the side raised his eyebrows. That car is really handsome. It was a limited edition. How much did it cost? I'm talking about the person. As the girl said that, she turned back to look at the young man who brushed past her. She mumbled, "He's really handsome. He's holding a guitar. Is he going to sing? I want to stay and listen. Why didn't he take off his mask? I want to see how handsome he is. He definitely didn't take it off because he doesn't look handsome wearing it. That's fine too. Leave some room for imagination. What song do you guys think he will sing? That's hard to say. It's coming." The onlookers were all very enthusiastic. After all, the sight of such a handsome young man with his face turned to the side and tuning his guitar was enough to make people stop. Not to mention the equipment the young man had brought. Instead of the usual microphone, he wore something that looked like a headset on his ear. The crooked part was a small microphone. Needless to say, the youngster looked even more handsome with the equipment. Then, the young man smiled at the girls who were looking at him. A series of exclamations could be heard. "I can't take it anymore. It's so cool." The young man lowered his head, took out some wires, and inserted them into a small notebook. Just when countless people thought that the youngster was playing a small sound system to make it easier for him to choose the music, the computer screen had actually been split into two parts. This was because the USB drive that was plugged into it had already determined that this was a network intrusion. As for where the intruder was, Bojo glanced over, a smile on her face. Her silver short hair was now black and stuck to her left ear. The diamond earring reflected the lights, glinting like a black gem. His slender fingers moved up and down on the keyboard. His hand speed was so fast that no one saw the codes that appeared one after another on the screen and the dialog boxes that kept popping up. It wasn't difficult for her to hack into a commercial plaza since there was a public network here. There were countless people using the Wi-Fi account. It was easy to create a loophole in the system. In a short 30 seconds, Bojo had broken through the firewall of the shopping mall. From the surveillance room, she controlled the broadcasting rights of the entire plaza. At the same time, she set up many virtual IPs. Bojo wasn't worried that the police would lock onto her. The logic was simple. Anyone in the commercial plaza would be holding onto an electronic product. Regardless of whether it was a phone or a laptop, it would become the originating IP. But she still had to speed up. She was most afraid of going up against the Almighty. Fortunately, Smith was in charge of the crime squad. It's time to greet an old friend. Bojo smiled faintly. She pressed the enter button and hid the dialogue box. She hugged her guitar and straightened her body. This time, Bojo was back to Z's style. She wanted to tell the police that she was here and that they could catch her if they had the ability. Shall we start? The girls couldn't wait any longer. Bojo tilted her head, making the final adjustments. Her voice rang out. Hey, MH, sound test. He's so cute. You call him cute no matter what he does. It's just a sound test. Are you jealous? You should grow up like him. I'm your boyfriend, not him. What's there to be jealous about? Even though that was what she said, the jealousy in her voice could be heard. The girl smiled sweetly at the side. As more and more people crowded over, Bojo finally lifted her lids. When she looked at them, her clear voice rang out slowly. Use your good morning to accompany me for dinner. Remember to save your thoughts in the piggy bank. I look at the twinkling stars in the sky. I hear the cowherd telling the weaver girl to be brave. When the voice rang out, everyone's eyes lit up. Even through the mask, the charm of the youngster's voice couldn't be suppressed. But, what song is that? It's so good, I've never heard it before. Is the generation gap here? Come over, let your boyfriend explain it to you. You were still in primary school when the song was released. Go, don't disturb me. Perhaps it was because the youngster's eyes were too beautiful, or perhaps it was because of the gentleness in her clear voice. More and more people stopped. Bojo sang softly, her lips curving up. Aren't you afraid that we are on opposite ends of the earth, watching your greeting? Riding a magic carpet, flying at the speed of light to me. You let me see the North Star and the Cross Star as a companion, without my arm as a pillow. Are you used to it? Your telescope can't see the loneliness of my northern hemisphere. The Pacific Ocean's tides follow the earth back and forth. I'll wait patiently, waiting for the day you reach the shore. When she reached the word shore, she turned and glanced at Hoshino, who was smiling faintly at her. Both of them were wearing masks, but they exuded different auras. If the young man was cool to the point of being devilish, then Hoshino, who was standing quietly in the crowd, was like spring water flowing in the mountains, like a prince. With their chemistry, they just needed a look to start the operation. In that instant, Hoshino broke into a smile, glancing up. There was a loud swoosh. The big screen that was originally playing the advertisement suddenly changed, and a big Z appeared. No, it wasn't just the various screens in the commercial plaza. It was also the same word that appeared on the phones of the people walking in the crowd. Some people who had watched sci-fi blockbusters immediately thought that it was a hacker attack. The entire commercial plaza was in an uproar. Everyone was fiddling with their phones, but the screen was frozen, not moving at all. At this moment, a manipulated voice appeared on the various screens in the plaza. Before I introduce myself, I have to greet my old friend. Smith, I heard that you came all the way from the Fifth Avenue to China just to catch me. TSK, the more you suffer, the braver you become. Even after so many failures, you still refuse to give up. But I'm really annoyed that you mistook me for someone else. The moment this sentence came out, it immediately attracted the attention of the police. The commercial plaza immediately took measures to remove the network intrusion. But when they sat at the service counter, they realized that the computers were no longer under their control. The network attack this time was too sudden, but it didn't affect the normal operations of the shopping mall. It only occupied the screen. But even so, the people in charge of the shopping mall expressed that they had never encountered such a situation before. Usually, large shopping malls like this would have police cars parked nearby. The patrolling policeman reacted quickly, informing the station at the first instance. It could be said that the local police station was busy to a new height that day. Such a case was too unique and had a negative impact. They couldn't handle it properly, so they could only report it to the higher-ups. At that time, Smith was sitting in the interrogation room, looking at Rao Rong opposite him. He arched a brow. "I finally caught you, Z." Rao Rong didn't speak, his hands cuffed. His brows were the same as before, but the corners of his lips curled up, revealing traces of mockery and sorrow. The arrest came very suddenly, and the accusations were overwhelming. Honestly speaking, he didn't mind going in. If his father could be vindicated, he was willing to do anything. But the moment the crime squad charged into the club, he clearly saw that person's gaze had dimmed. He was probably disappointed. Be it him or his team members. Rao Rong lowered his lids, glancing at his cuffed hands. Who knew that he used to really love esports? "Why aren't you speaking, Z?" Smith chuckled, looking confident. "You don't have to think of an excuse to escape. China isn't like the Fifth Avenue, you can't escape even if you want to." While Smith was speaking, Lin Chintao and his team members were being interrogated beside Rao Rong. "Regarding Rao Rong, I would like Mr. Lin to provide us with some evidence," the interrogator said politely. Lin Chintao hadn't said a word since he entered. As the most powerful witness, they had to pry his mouth open. But his demeanor made it difficult for them to get any information out of him. He was good-looking and talkative, but at this moment, Lin Chintao was more silent than anyone else. "Mr. Lin." The interrogator was about to take the gentle route. Lin Chintao suddenly spoke, his voice low. "Do you know that person?" "What?" The interrogator couldn't react. Lin Chintao glanced up, his eyes bloodshot. "Rao Rong, what kind of person is he?" The interrogator remained silent, glancing at one another. Lin Chintao didn't seem to care what others thought of him. "When I first joined the team, I was always at the bottom. My hand speed wasn't fast enough and I couldn't keep up with my tactics. Many rookies weren't willing to team up with me, feeling that I was a burden. They blocked me in the changing room and forced me to leave the team. It was the captain who stood in front of me, telling me that talent was important but hard work was more important. He told them not to form small groups and ostracize other members. For the sake of the team's victory, he would stay up until 1 in the morning to study the best strategies of each member. He would often lie in front of the computer, revealing the brightest smile for every victory. When he lost, he would tell us that it didn't matter, we could try again next year. How could such a person purposely lose the National League for money? Back then, when the relationship between the team and the club was at its most tense, he took the risk of being frozen by the club to speak up for us. Many companies tried to poach him but he didn't leave because of us dragging him down. Do you know what the older members repaid him with? They forced him to leave the team, causing him to waste 2 years in esports. The club kept sending in useless relatives. If it wasn't for the captain, we would have died horribly against Supreme Alliance. The interrogator paused. "Mr. Lin, I know you have a good relationship with Rao Rong, but this isn't the time to be emotional. If you can provide us with evidence, we will be able to get to the bottom of the case." "I don't have any evidence." Lin Chintao's gaze was resolute. "Because I don't believe Captain is that kind of person." The interrogator knew he wouldn't be able to get any results even if he continued, hence, he left the room. He shook his head at Director Huang. "It's too difficult." "Any progress on Smith's side?" Director Huang's heart sank after listening to Lin Chintao's words. Perhaps it was because of these experiences that Rao Rong had changed, just like his father. Ever since Rao Rong came in, he only said one thing, which was that he was the one who did it. He didn't say anything else. Does that mean he confessed? Yes, it had been a smooth interrogation, but because of that, Director Huang wanted to ask more questions. But Rao Rong's attitude. Director Huang sighed. The person beside him reminded, the higher-ups want to close the case as soon as possible. The maiden's sacrifice has caused a huge impact. The media has heard that the culprit has been caught and are still waiting for the verdict. Director Huang paced back and forth, glancing at the time on his watch. Call for a press conference. Yes. Chapter 969. Director Huang lowered his gaze. When he saw the live stream, his eyes widened in shock. He snatched the phone over, a single word flashing in his eyes, Z. Smith was still looking at Rao Rong, trying to dig something out when the interrogation room door was slammed open. I think you should take a look at this. It was Director Huang. Smith frowned, his body stiffening as he bolted upright. That's impossible. The Real Z is in the city center, the IP address is in the plaza. Director Huang's reaction was much calmer than Smith's. We have to take action immediately. Smith listened to the voice in the video, the veins on his forehead popping when he heard the word TSK. It's really him. D***it. That's why we caught the wrong person. Director Huang glanced at Rao Rong, turning towards the crime squad members who were still looking at their phones. Stop looking, hurry up and inform the professionals to lock onto Z's location. Yes. The crime squad had never been in such a mess, everyone was moving as fast as they could. Found him. Suddenly, there was news from the technician. Smith's eyes lit up, leaning over. Where is the exact location of the mall? Second floor. The moment the technician said that, he added, no, that's not right, it's the 6th floor, that's not right either, it's outdoors. Smith grabbed a handful of hair. Where exactly is it? The technician wore an earpiece, watching the screen filled with red dots, his voice trembling. That's impossible. How can there be so many IP addresses? It was harder than ascending to the heavens to identify Z among so many IPs. Smith clenched his fists. D***it, he's using this again. Let me tell you, where I am, if you have the ability, come and find me. His arrogance was the reason why the Interpol couldn't stand him. He felt as though he was flaunting his intelligence in front of him. There were so many people in the plaza, which one was he? Director Huang panicked as well. The video was like a virus, spreading crazily on the internet. Now, there was only one person who had a solution. Director Huang whipped out his phone, dialing a familiar number. Hello, Chin Mo, the Real Z has appeared. Chin Mo received the call and was on his way to the Fu family's house. When he heard the last sentence, his fingers paused and his gaze deepened. It was like a vast ocean, making it hard to read his emotions. His handsome face was reflected in the car window. He didn't seem the least bit flustered by Z's appearance. It was as though in his heart, this day would come sooner or later. Chin Mo instructed the driver to turn around while speaking to Director Huang calmly, give me a simple explanation of the current situation. The moment Director Huang heard that emotionless voice, he knew he was saved. He explained Z's appearance from start to finish. Chapter 970. Director Huang stilled, muttering, why didn't I think of that? Chin Mo didn't listen to him, he continued, arrange for all the police to head to the scene, Z isn't done with his task. Not done. Director Huang glared at him. What else is she trying to do? Our Jiang City's police force is going to be slapped in the face by her. Chin Mo glanced out of the car window, his gaze deep. You caught the wrong person, she is seeking justice for Rao Rong. Director Huang paused. It's our fault, but Rao Rong has admitted to the crime, I can't do anything about it. Send people to the scene. Qin Mo's tone remained the same. Move in plain clothes. Director Huang replied, all right. He then asked, what about you? Qin Mo glanced at the long queue of cars in front. I'm rushing over. That's good, we have to catch C. You don't know how passive I am after her actions, I still have to explain to the higher-ups. Before Director Huang could finish, Qin Mo hung up. Director Huang choked. Why did he feel that Qin Mo was still the same as before? He didn't like to hear Zi's bad points. In reality, Director Huang didn't know that he wasn't the one who felt passive. Instead, he was sitting in the dorm room, staring at her phone, her left hand clenching tightly around Fan Jia. Due to the commotion caused by the incident, the other roommates in the dormitory were also watching. After a girl saw the video, she couldn't help but sigh, I always feel that Z is very handsome. What's going on? Fan Jia lifted her head abruptly. The girl was taken aback by her stare. For some reason, she felt a chill run down her spine. What's wrong? Nothing. Fan Jia held onto her phone, a sweet smile on her face. I'm going out for some fresh air. After walking out of the room, Fan Jia's expression sank. Z was still alive. How was that possible? She hadn't seen Z's face. But she knew some information. At that time, they had clearly set up a plan to kill that person. Why was Z back? That wasn't all, she was in Jiang City. She was right beside them. D****. Fan Jia swung her arm, smashing her phone against the wall. Z, who exactly was it? It was destined to be a restless night. The Major Crimes Division mobilized all available vehicles. Just to encircle an international criminal. Regarding the maiden's sacrifice, you don't have any leads, but I can provide you with a few clues. Smith, my old friend, the mastermind is a girl, a student from a university. She isn't even 23 years old and has a sweet appearance. She can't be the Rao Rong you caught. I'll show you the evidence later. No, I'll show everyone the evidence. There was once an esports player who wanted to seek justice for his father after losing his father. He took many detours, but he had never let anyone down and wouldn't fight a meaningless competition for money. Why did he come out? He wanted to tell the female student who impersonated me that your hacking skills aren't up to par. When the people in the commercial square heard the last sentence, there was an uproar. Some of the police officers at the scene had already started to intervene. Chapter 971. Look! The audience surrounding the youngster suddenly pointed at the big screen behind the youngster when they heard the high-pitched singing. At this time, the content above had changed. Rao Rong's side profile appeared on the screen along with his father, a hero who wanted to report corruption but was silenced. The photo looked old because Rao Rong was obviously different back then, he was very young. Pieces of evidence were displayed in front of everyone through the video. It was like a 2-minute film. But this movie actually existed in real life. It included the scene where Rao Rong was chased out by the club, and after his return, he didn't hesitate to offend the club in order to replace the worst player the investor had arranged. And what Rao Rong had said at the end of the competition. At this moment, it wasn't just the people in the square watching the video, there were also Rong fans holding onto their phones, suddenly feeling like crying. They had liked this person for a long time. Those who had been with him till now all knew what kind of person he was. That person was the strongest sorcerer in the esports scene, one of the 3 pillars along with Almighty Shao and Almighty Qin. He wouldn't play any sports match that went against his own conscience for money. He wouldn't really lose his humanity. There was too much unfairness when it came to that person. It would indeed cause a person to be twisted. Perhaps it was because he had such a father. That was why he could survive in the cracks. But at the same time, someone had let down his youth. At his peak, his family had been ruined and he had been in such a state for over a year. He was someone who loved esports so much. Do you still remember the youngster who had stood in front of his teammates when he first debuted, wearing his uniform and smiling? That scene had been in the past for too long. For a long time, why didn't they see the almost extinguished light in that person's eyes when he appeared again? What exactly did he go through to become the complete opposite of what he had been in the past? He had been maliciously suspected, expelled by the club, betrayed by his teammates and robbed of his glory. However, even so, in the end, he hadn't done anything that went against his conscience. He had wanted to redress his father's grievances, going against the organization, but he hadn't executed the organization's orders. It was because he had told himself that he would only punish those who deserved to be punished and not the innocent. In the face of some pointed evidence, he couldn't deny it, because if he did, his father would be wronged for life. When everyone saw the final scene, not only the ordinary people, but even the members of the key case investigation unit who were still on duty stopped in their tracks, their eyes red. Rao Rong's father had brought them along. President Chin. Not far from the commercial square, a Land Rover was still queuing up to enter the parking lot. The driver looked at the screen in the distance and couldn't help but turn to look at his young master. Chin Mo's eyes were also on the words on the screen and the old photos. Then, he pushed open the car door, held the metal bar in front of him with one hand, and jumped over. His black trench coat drew an arc in the wind. The driver opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. After all, the young master's appearance just now was really handsome, very different from his usual self. Just as everyone was looking up at the big screen, Chin Mo walked into the crowd, holding his phone as he dialed Director Huang's number. There's no need to search inside, Z is outside. Director Huang, who had already entered the mall, was confused. Outside? How do you type on a computer outside? You have to ask Z, Chin Mo replied faintly. Chin Mo's voice was calm. The view isn't as good in the mall as it is outside. Also, we can see the police's movements from here. Get our men out and move quickly because Z is already wrapping things up. Director Huang widened his eyes. Wrapping things up? The video on the screen is still playing, how can it be wrapping things up? Z's network attack can be delayed. Chin Mo walked through the crowd, his eyes sweeping past the people that walked past him. Then, he headed towards the fountain. You can ask Smith about this. Director Huang pressed his throbbing head. Smith has already gone crazy. Is that so? Z slapped him in the face. This method is indeed maddening, the higher-ups should have taken action. Do you still have Rao Rong's father's file? I want to take a look. Chin Mo's gaze was as deep as the night, walking as though he was searching for someone. Director Huang fell into a rare silence. It's a little difficult, it has been more than a year and it will take some effort to present some evidence. But for his case, the difficulty lies in the fact that the person in charge of his sentence and the file management has already retired. Some of the information has also been lost, making it difficult to reconstruct the situation. Which means someone has tampered with the file. Chin Mo's voice sank. Then check who he wanted to report back then. The information has been lost and there must be an internal problem. At this point, Director Huang understood that the person they were looking for was most likely someone with a high position and authority. As for how high this person's authority was, Director Huang glanced up at the screen. To be able to bury a grievance for such a long time without even seeing the light of day, it had to be someone in charge. Director Huang's heart couldn't help but tremble. If it wasn't for Z's video, the grievance would never have been known. Z, the evil hacker, had chosen to use such a method to make a comeback. Was it to let everyone know the truth? Director Huang's body trembled. When he looked at the screen, his expression changed. This was Z's intention. In that moment, Director Huang seemed to understand why Qin Mo had never believed Z was the culprit from the start. Even if their modus operandi was very similar, even the way they acted was 90% similar. But in terms of intention, it was worlds apart. Z was using a hacker's method to do the same thing. To cry out for justice. To let the truth be known and to return justice to the victim. Even so, Director Huang didn't believe their path was the same. Because they had to consider more. That was right, someone like Z would become the ideal hero in everyone's heart. But to maintain peace, they had to rely on the strict policemen who were constantly on the move and didn't even have time to eat when they were busy. Against Z. Even Director Huang felt that it was a pity. But he still had to say that people with different beliefs couldn't make plans together. In the past, Qin Mo had deviated when it came to Z. Therefore, this sentence could not be more suitable to be used on these two people. Among all the criminals, Z was the only one who could earn Qin Mo's praise, no one else. But a criminal was a criminal after all. He believed that Qin Mo had a balance in his heart. And now, Z had appeared again. Even he didn't know how Qin Mo would deal with it. Outside the plaza, the crowd was surging. The video on the screen was still playing. Qin Mo suddenly paused, the corners of his eyes arching. Where was the singing coming from? He furrowed his brows for a moment, then followed the sound and quickly walked over. At this moment, the singing stopped. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed in that instant. At this moment, the youngster in the middle of the plaza removed her guitar from her neck, placing it behind her back. Bojio's actions were natural, just like a singer by the side of the street, packing her belongings and heading home after encountering trouble. She bent her long legs, closing the laptop on the ground. The speed was still running. There was a minute delay. To Bojio, a minute was enough. She turned, but didn't go to the motorcycle parked at the parking lot. Because she knew that if she rode the motorcycle now, it would be a signal to the police that she was there. She carried the guitar and walked into the crowd. Bojio was still wearing a black mask. Even though the police had moved from the inside to the outside of the mall, there were two policemen who brushed past her. They didn't notice that the person they were looking for had walked past them, heading towards the crowd. Bojio didn't walk quickly because most of the people around her were still immersed in the video. Their emotions and walking were heavy. At this moment, it wasn't a good thing to walk quickly. Some of the girls watched as the youngster, who had mesmerized them, walked with them, their hearts beating faster. They hadn't expected the youngster to walk in the same direction. They wanted to ask him where he was going and if it was on the way. Just as the girls' faces turned darker, the youngster suddenly glanced up. The young man suddenly looked up and saw a tall and straight figure standing in the crowd. It was as if he was a god waiting for a rabbit to come to him. Bojio's fingers stilled, her pupils trembling. She started to analyze the situation. There was still a distance to walk from here to there. But she couldn't just turn around and leave, because that would only make the Almighty notice her at first glance. Hence, she could only face him head-on. This situation was similar to the first time they had met at the Fifth Avenue. The difference was that Bojio already knew how formidable her opponent was. She had seen the Almighty, but he hadn't seen her. Even if he had seen her, she had disguised herself. But Bojio wasn't sure if her disguise would work in front of the Almighty. Bojio watched as the distance between them shortened. Her left hand, which was in her pocket, clenched tightly. 90 meters. 80 meters. 70 meters. 60 meters. Bojo counted the numbers in her mind. There were 2 times when the Almighty's gaze swept over her. Her heart didn't seem to belong to her, beating rapidly. She had to think of a way. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would be recognized. Chapter 972. Hoshino, who was as gentle as jade, reached out to press down on his earpiece. I'm here. Create a small commotion to divert Chin Mo's attention. When Bojo spoke, she tilted her head. Her voice was so soft that no one around her could hear what she was saying. Chin Mo. Hoshino adjusted his position, catching sight of the tall and aloof figure. His fingers paused. Okay. The moment Hoshino said okay, Bojo and Chin Mo were only 20 meters apart. If it wasn't for the person in between, it would have been 20 meters. If it wasn't for the person in between, the Almighty would have recognized her. The Almighty would have recognized her long ago. Even the ticket seller at the cinema hadn't been able to escape the Almighty's sharp observation. This time, even Bojo wasn't sure how high her chances of escaping were. But wouldn't it be more exciting this way? The youngster curled her lips into a smile. Listening to the discussion about her behind her, she suddenly paused and turned her head back. The black mask covered most of her face, but her voice was gentle and a little low. You guys seem to like the song I sang just now. The girl's heart started racing. They looked at the youngster's beautiful eyes, feeling as though they were being sucked in. What was this? She was suddenly being hit on by a pretty boy. And it was the pretty boy they had been trying to get his contact details. MH? Why aren't you speaking? Bojo tilted her body. Even her shoulders were a little low. After all, with her height, she had to lower herself if she wanted to listen to a normal girl's words. The young man's shoulders were lowered, as though he was listening to what she had to say. The scent of the young man wafted towards her, and a pair of deep eyes stared at her. He was so handsome that it made her breath quicken. Any girl would feel their heart racing when they were stared at like that. The girl who was being hit on felt a little dizzy, her cheeks flushed. MMH, I like it. I'm planning to sing at the next intersection, you can follow me if you like. The youngster's gaze was so sincere, her aura gentle and gentle. It was hard to resist. Follow, you have to follow. He's asking me out, he's definitely asking me out. The girl smiled happily. Bojo maintained their intimate position. There were still 5 meters left. At this moment, Chin Mo's gaze landed on him. Not far away, a loud and clear sound suddenly rang out. Z. Where's Z? No one knew who said it, because it came from the crowd. But it was such a sound. This attracted the attention of all the police. In addition, there was a person who was flying through the crowd. His speed was so fast that the people on the other side immediately moved. Even Chin Mo's figure shifted for a moment. But it was only for an instant. As soon as he took a step forward, he immediately retracted his leg. Those eyes were very deep. Don't go over. He spoke to Director Huang through the Bluetooth earpiece. But it was too late. Once they took action, there was no turning back. This was the norm when carrying out a mission. In addition, there were so many people in the commercial square. Even if an order was given, it would be very difficult to return to its original position. However, this also showed that the person was very close to him. Sun Tzu's Art of War. A diversion. Chin Mo's handsome side profile was more dignified than ever. The corners of his lips lifted slightly, his eyes sweeping across everyone around him. Chin Mo's smile made Bojo feel danger. Even after such a huge commotion, the Almighty still hadn't left. The immense pressure was similar to the time she had been in the Fifth Avenue. She had avoided the police easily, but not this person. Her wig had been removed and she had been forced to fight. Today, she didn't want to fight. Because if she fought, she would definitely lose her position. Losing her position meant that her identity would be lost. Fortunately, she was prepared. She was prepared to prevent the Almighty from falling for her trap. To be honest, everyone who played hero had a lot of tricks up their sleeves. Under normal circumstances, the culprit would appear. Wouldn't an ordinary person move? The Almighty stood there without moving, as though he was waiting for her to come to him. Bojo arched a brow. Just as she was about to meet the Almighty, she suddenly turned and asked the girl beside her, "What's going on?" They seemed to be arresting someone. The girl only had eyes for the youngster. Bojo laughed lightly, her tone natural. "Do you want to take a look?" "I don't think so. Will it be dangerous?" After all, the commotion was huge. She wasn't sure what would happen. Were all boys curious? The girl tilted her head towards the youngster wearing a black mask. "All right then." Bojo sounded helpless. She raised her left hand and pressed onto the backpack on the girl's back. Her voice was low and warm. "It's a little heavy, can I help you?" It's fine. The girl blushed. "You can just stand beside me, why do you need to carry the backpack?" Bojo laughed softly. "I really don't know what to do with you." That pampering tone. Someone was drunk. Some people frowned slightly when they saw this scene. The latter was Chin-mo. The moment he locked onto the youngster, he almost suspected that he was the person he was especially familiar with. However, their posture was too intimate, as if they were a couple who had just started dating. Z wouldn't bring a girl with him. Besides, the intimacy wasn't fake. It shouldn't be. There wasn't any time for Chin-mo to confirm anything. Amidst the crowd, the couple had already walked past him. Chin-mo glanced back, suspicion still lingering in his eyes. Walking in front, Bojo could feel the Almighty's burning gaze behind her. It was as though he could see right through her. Fortunately, the girl reacted at this time. She blushed and said, "Can we always be together later?" Bojo felt as though every girl was her angel. "Let me take a look, if it's possible." It was this last interaction that caused Chin-mo to shift his gaze away from the youngster's back, towards the other person. In reality, Bojo didn't know that it was her back view that made Chin-mo even more suspicious. Fortunately, Bojo had prepared beforehand. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for her to escape this time. The girl was the key. Bojo smiled. Successfully escaping from the Almighty was a great achievement for her. The girl watched from the side and couldn't help murmuring, "He's really handsome." It was also these 4 words that were faintly floating in the air, and the message within them was captured by others. Chin-mo, who had shifted his gaze away, suddenly turned his head back. His dark eyes emitted the fiercest glint. Actually, Chin-mo wasn't the only one who noticed the problem. Even Bojo knew that there was something wrong with the 4 words. Which couple would use such a tone to compliment each other's handsomeness? *T flashed across Bojo's mind. She was 1 step faster than Chin-mo. Before the girl could react, Bojo heard the youngster apologize. He heard the young man say, "Sorry." Then, she turned around. The youngster's black bangs scattered over her forehead. Her skin, which was not covered by the mask, was fair and translucent, as though there was no color in it. Her slightly pursed lips carried a trace of stubbornness, as though someone was about to recognize her, and she felt that this game was not that fun. The next second, she was pushed out by the youngster, her words echoing, "If I had a choice, I wouldn't want him to carry you." Before the girl could react, she was pushed into the arms of another person. The smell of peppermint tobacco made the girl pause for a moment. That person. The girl lifted her head for a moment, her attention instantly captured by the beautiful curve of his chin. Chi Nemo furrowed his brows heavily. He moved her away and ran towards the youngster. Both their figures and skills were very beautiful and handsome. As they shuttled through the crowd, it was as if they were filming an American blockbuster. Bojo moved swiftly while observing her surroundings. She arched a brow slightly as she glanced at the figure in front of her. She took large strides forward, using the momentum from her body. With two loud thuds, under everyone's watchful eyes, the youngster leaped over the car and landed on the roof. F***ck, he's so handsome. This can't be a movie, right? Qigong. It wasn't any Qigong, it was ninja skills. As the young master of the hacker world, if she didn't have such skills, she wouldn't be able to make a living. But even so, when those girls saw this scene, they couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The youngster standing on the roof was extremely eye-catching. She didn't forget to toss her guitar to the side when she did this. She successfully became a stumbling block for the person chasing after her. If it had been anyone else, they might have fallen. But the person chasing after her wasn't anyone else, it was Chi Nemo. With a beautiful turn, he bent his long legs slightly and heard a loud thud. The guitar was kicked into pieces in midair. Bojo heard the sound but didn't even turn her head. Amidst everyone's exclamations, the young man took a step back and leaped from one roof to another like a bolt of lightning. Then, he jumped out of the car. Taking advantage of the gap between the red lights, he rolled on the ground, got up, and dashed toward the opposite side of the road. Some people from the Key Case Investigation Unit noticed the commotion. But it was useless. The youngster wasn't just skilled. When this person moved, his speed was especially fast. Moreover, he was in the middle of the road. How were they going to catch him if he could use such a method? They could only rely on young Master Chin. That was what the crime squad members were thinking. He was too far away and they couldn't shoot him. At the start of the operation, young Master Chin had instructed them not to use guns. But even if they had guns, they wouldn't be able to aim. The youngster's mobility was too strong. She didn't leave the crowd. It wasn't easy for them to shoot. It was the same even when she barged into the crowd. The crowd had assumed that the youngster would leave just like that. But what they didn't expect was that there was another figure following closely behind. His slender legs and his black windbreaker fluttered as he moved, making everyone feel that they must have come to the wrong place. To be honest, both of them were equally skilled and fast. The only difference was the length of their legs. Chi Mo's legs were longer than Bojo's and the Almighty was good at predicting her escape route. The moment she moved, the Almighty would know where she would land. Hence, the distance between them narrowed. Just as she was about to be caught, Bojo turned and threw something behind her. Swoosh! It was a pack of cigarettes. As Chi Nemo dodged, he asked faintly, "Don't you have anything else to throw?" Bojo didn't reply. Any turn would give the other party a chance to catch her. The Almighty's height and long legs gave him a natural advantage. Bojo ran, kicking the wall beside her. Using the recoil, she sped up and flipped over the railing in front of her. Still not giving up. Chi Nemo arched a brow, rushing over. He didn't need to kick the wall to catch up to the cold figure. The difference in leg length was indeed useful at a crucial moment. Bojo didn't have anything else to throw other than the USB lighter in her pocket. But if she threw it out, her identity would definitely be exposed. Right at this moment, Chi Nemo narrowed his eyes. He estimated the distance and reached out with his left hand, grabbing onto the youngster's shirt. Bojo paused. Without hesitation, she flipped in the air, using the recoil to temporarily escape the fate of being dragged back. But that wasn't the end. Qin Mo was already close to her. This meant that she would either win or be caught. The moment she thought about it, she would be met with shock or disgust. Bojiu seemed to have an endless amount of energy. Her relationship with the Almighty was strained. If she was caught, everything would be over. With that thought in mind, Bojiu lifted her leg and kicked towards Qin Mo. The sharp wind seemed to be able to split everything in half. Qin Mo took a step back, narrowing his eyes. He reached out once more, but this time, he didn't grab her arm like he had done at the Fifth Avenue. Instead, he went for the black mask on the youngster's face. Bojiu jolted. She used her left hand to block, turning beautifully. Even though the mask was caught, Qin Mo couldn't see her face. But without the mask, she wouldn't be able to face the Almighty. Even if she made some adjustments, the Almighty would definitely recognize her. It was too difficult. Bojiu jumped again, but this time, her luck wasn't as good. In order to avoid the youngster in front of her, she tilted slightly. It was this distance that allowed Qin Mo to grab onto her shirt again. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.